wonderful.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Christin DeVries. She is with me running for the House seat 123 for Beaufort. She will be on the November ballot running for the House seat 123 in Beaufort. So, Christin, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and about your platform?
Sure. So my name's Chris DeVries. I'm House District 123. And for those who don't know, House District 123 is most of Hilton Head Island and all of Daufuskie Island. So we are the island district. First, I want to thank the South Carolina for Education organization for hosting this forum. This is wonderful, great opportunity to talk about education issues, and certainly I think one of the most critical issues in my platform, and should be everybody's platform, the state of public education in the state of South Carolina. I'm running for the legislative seat because I think Hilton Head and Daufuskie need representation that really reflects the needs of and the concerns of our population. Throughout my career, I actually worked for a variety of nonprofit organizations in the nonprofit sector, and my primary objective was to advocate for public policies, most focused on healthcare, but I also worked on some other issues as well. I spent part of those years, 10 years actually, working for the American Nurses Association, representing nurses across the country, and part of that job was working in coalition we often work together with teachers because there are a lot of similarities between some of the public policy needs of the profession of teaching and the profession of nursing. And in fact, I think that is where my type of experience will be very beneficial to the people of Hilton Head, in that I have spent my entire life bringing together diverse groups of people and crafting real life solutions and policies and getting them enacted into law.
Hey, Phil, how are you doing?
I'm sorry, I've been sitting here. My mother always said, "Be in your seat 5 minutes early and stay." I was here early, but I'm sorry. I don't know what the problem was. All of a sudden, here I am. But all right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Phil. Chris, if you don't mind, just maybe finishing up what you were saying, and then we'll get started with Phil.
Okay, sure. So I would say after my professional career, more recently, I've been involved as a community activist, worked with many local groups here on Hilton Head, which has furthered my comprehension of the needs of our community. And I think my life experience will benefit that community. My passion is public policy. I certainly understand the connection between the quality of people's lives and the passage of laws. And it is this passion that has fueled not only my career, but also my education. I have a bachelor's degree in geology. I'm not sure why, but it was fun. And I moved quickly on and got a master's in public policy. But I do believe education is a lifelong experience. And so I actually am now currently working on my PhD also in public policy. I will say from my experience, teaching is one of the most undervalued, I believe, professions in our life. And as we discussed, I am really personally thankful that I am, during this pandemic crisis, I am not in the position to have to supplement the learning of my child in home. But she is also, as I said, suffering a bit from this crisis. She graduated from college in December with a promise of a job in the hospitality sector, which has now evaporated. And so she is sitting here at home with me in Hilton Head, pondering her future and what the world will look like as a chef. So thank you for inviting me here today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Well, thank you so much. And for everyone watching, this is Phil Hartman. He is running against our incumbent, Jeff Bradley. So he will be on the Republican primary docket for our June election. Is that correct, Mr. Phil?
That is correct.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your platform.
Okay. Well, first of all, nice to meet you, Lisa and Christine. We've not met before. It was nice to meet you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to the educators in South Carolina. A little bit about me. I spent 31 years in public education. And during that time, I spent 20 years as a director of community services, and I retired as a school superintendent. Yeah, in my time as a director of community services, we were going through a philosophy at that time in our local school districts and in Michigan, where I work, of involving the schools and community as much as possible in terms of looking at the schools for the community use in terms of meeting community needs. And during that time, I had an opportunity to work with local governments, state government, local business officials, medical profession in our area, the General Motor plants, and many of the citizens. And we developed such programs as early childhood education to adult education, adult high school completion, GED, college extension. We worked with senior citizens. We worked with the county library. It was a position that really serviced the community and providing meeting the community needs as determined by this group of residents. Then I worked as a school superintendent before I retired. That also gave me a nice opportunity to work with local governments and again with the community. But a little deeper in terms of my interest and involvement in education, I have three brothers who retired from public schools. I have a wife who retired from public schools. I have an aunt who retired from public education. My daughter-in-law is a teacher at the Hilton Head High School. And I have two grandchildren involved in the middle school and the high school here. So you won't find a more stronger advocate for public education than Phil Hartman.
Well, that's great, Phil. Thank you so much. So for the people watching, we've got some questions about education, and we would love to hear y'all's opinion on education itself. So Ms. Christin, sorry.
Christine. Or Chris.
All right. Well, so Chris, what is your opinion on the state of public education in South Carolina today?
Sorry, it froze up there for a minute.
That's all right.
Could you repeat the question? I didn't hear it.
Sure. So what is your opinion on the state of public education in South Carolina today?
Well, as we know, South Carolina ranks rather low when it comes to national ranking of education. But I also know that there's great disparity within the state. So, for example, here in Hilton Head and even in our neighboring community of Bluffton, our schools are pretty high quality. They have a lot of resources, but that pales in comparison to this public schools just up the 95 in Jasper County, where there's an appalling lack of resources. So there's a real great unevenness in the schools, and that only the children suffer from that. I would say, though, even with the quality of being, relatively good here in Hilton Head, we still have issues of overcrowding. Our population here is increasing quite quickly, especially in neighboring Bluffton. And so schools that were built 3, 4, 5 years ago are already having to have extra classrooms and mobile classrooms. So I think for me, it's clear that one of our priorities must be to reduce class size. And the way to do that is to attract and retain quality teachers. It really is the most critical component of our school system today. I think also as an add-on, we also must assure safety in our schools so teachers can focus on teaching. So I know teachers are the foundation of the school system here, and that they really should be the expert resources as the legislature looks at how to reform the system and also make it equitable across the state.
Great. Thank you so much. Same question for you, Mr. Hartman. What is your opinion on the state of public education in South Carolina today?
The state of South Carolina is in the middle of the pack when it comes to student expenditures as it relates to other states. Yet we're at the bottom of the list when it comes to educational achievement. And I really don't think the students in South Carolina and the kids we send to our schools are that much different than they are anywhere else in the United States. Why are we performing at such a low level? Well, a couple of the things is the dollars that we're spending per pupil, while it's in the middle of the pack, those dollars are not getting into the classroom, and we don't rate very high on getting the dollars that we're spending per pupil into the classroom. The other thing that has been a problem is that we haven't been able to keep teachers here, and one of the reasons we haven't been able to keep teachers here is because of our low salary. And frankly, when a beginning teacher's average is somewhere between $37,000 and $45,000, you say, and when you can have a part-time legislator making more money than a beginning teacher, we got problems in this state. So there's a couple things I think that we need to do. Number one is we need to find a funding source that is a funding source that we all can understand and that provides a foundation for the schools each and every year. So superintendents and school boards don't have to wonder what the county's going to give them or what the state's going to give them. We get a formula that moves forward on a small percentage each year with funding behind that formula. So we receive adequate funding each and every year for each and every student. The second thing that should happen is we need to get those dollars to the school district without strings attached so that schools can make decisions about what is best for their local schools. The one size does not fit all. What's best in Beaufort County is maybe not best in Charleston. What's best, even break that down. What's best at Hilton Head High School maybe not be the best for Bluffton School. So we need to give schools and superintendents more autonomy and more control over local expenditures and not put strings attached with what I call programs that like vocational education. And I don't use that example, but when you have when you're funding a program, dollars have to go to that program. Maybe one district need to provide that much money for that particular program. So the categorical funding does not need to be maybe with many restrictions, but that money needs to go to the district so it can flow. Next thing we need to do is support teachers and make sure that they get the support in the classroom and the resources and materials they need to deliver the curriculum which has been adopted by the district. And this coming fall, I think we're going to be in a real crisis as we get back to school. Our teachers have done a great job picking up and providing education through telecommunications and through the internet and so on and so forth, but it's not the same as having that teacher in the classroom. So as we get back to school this fall, we're really going to need to look hard at providing extra resources for these teachers in the classroom, because the learning curve and the difference in learning that's taken place this spring is going to be much greater than the normal little break that we usually see over the summer in a normal circumstance. So that's my feeling about the education in South Carolina. I think we have children here that can be at the top of the system. We just need to provide the support to the local districts, support to the staff, and involve the parents and the communities in this process.
Well, thank you so much. So, Chris, what would your steps be to improve education? I think Mr. Hartman kind of gave us his list. And Mr. Hartman, you can certainly elaborate on that in just a moment more if you need to. But Chris, what would be your steps?
I think my first step would be to increase teachers' pay, and not a one-time pay, but sometimes a salary schedule that assures pay raises throughout a teacher's career in the South Carolina education system. And when I talk about pay, it's not just pay, but also benefits. We have to have competitive salaries and benefits so we can attract teachers who have been educated here, but also teachers from out of state, and not only attract them, but retain them here, because that is what will make a good foundation and assure our kids, quality teachers. In addition to that, we certainly need to, as Mr. Hartman talked about, have a reliable source of funding for the schools, something we can depend upon. And those dollars, as he mentioned, need to get not just into the school system, but need to get into the classroom. I hear many, many stories, even here in Hilton Head, where we do have some resources of teachers having to spend out-of-pocket expenses to ensure that there's the correct supplies in their classroom. And to me, that is just not appropriate. So those would be the steps I would take in the immediate.
Thank you so much. I know bringing that up, since I know I told Chris, but Mr. Hartman, I am a high school science teacher. So, education is definitely why I'm on this call right now. But there are years where I will spend probably around close to $2,000 to $3,000 out of pocket for supplies for my classroom, because that $275 is gone within a matter of one Walmart shopping trip. And so it's what we do. And thankfully, I can afford to do that because my husband makes a lot of money. But a lot of teachers are not in that same boat. And so I can do those things for my students, but a lot of teachers can't spend that money on their kids. And being in a rural district, I feel like I have to provide those extra supplies for my kids, because many of my kids are currently being serviced by the food services right now, and they can't afford those backpacks and pencils and notebooks and paper, and I feel an obligation to buy those things for those kids. So that's definitely something that a lot of teachers feel just from the bottom of our hearts that we need to do, because we love kids and we want to help kids.
Wow.
So I'm going to also bring to you, Chris, because Mr. Hartman did discuss funding. So I'm going to bring up funding with you as well, and then maybe we can go back to Mr. Hartman and see if he's got anything he wants to add on that.
Okay.
So how would you address the funding yourself?
Good question. First, we do have an educational, formula, and at least in the short term, we should fully fund that formula, even if we don't agree with exactly how that formula is put together at the moment. Let's fully fund it. But we also need to look at how to revamp that formula to provide a more effective as well as reliable sources revenue to the school system. And I do concur that must include flexibility of the use of dollars by the different counties, because Beaufort County is not the same as Jasper County, and the needs are different and the priorities are different. I think we need to examine the sources of funding for public education, including looking at Act 388 to look at whether we are really allocating funding in the most in the most equitable way and the most effective way. Right now, as we know, as a resident of South Carolina, our property taxes are not used for public education. We depend on sales taxes. But with the pandemic, and at least here in Hilton Head, the rapid decrease of tourism, those sales tax dollars are going to be impacted. So is that really the best way to provide a revenue stream? I think that we have to understand that there will be challenges in the short term, and there will be budget challenges next year going into the state legislature session. There will be more competitiveness for those dollars, and the legislators need to prioritize education in that competitive atmosphere, because we cannot let education suffer any more than it already has from a funding perspective.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Mr. Hartman, is there anything from the steps to improve education or funding that you would like to add to what you had already said?
I think the main thing is that we, and Christine talked about this a little bit, is that, the residents and parents of this state do not provide any direct funding through a common tax for the education of their children. I mean, they pay for buildings and so on, but for the day-to-day operation of the school, that's borne mainly through the sales tax, but more importantly by the non-residents. So we need to look at a secure funding source, and we need counties, I think, out of this a little bit, and that money needs to flow from the taxpayers to the districts, with the state making up the difference on a agreed upon pupil amount on a year-to-year basis. And I cannot say firmly enough that until we figure out a way to be able to look at school funding and understand it, because it comes from so many different avenues, it's hard to figure out where it's coming from each year. But an avenue for funding on a continual and regular basis that guarantees districts is what we need to be looking at.
Thank you so much. So, Chris, considering the pandemic has kind of temporarily stopped our state assessments, but education has still continued. Children have still continued to learn. Teachers have still continued to teach. What are your thoughts on those accountability measures now that we can see that children can learn without all of this testing?
Exactly. I will have to say, as a parent of a child who consistently performed poorly on tests throughout her school career, and yet graduated in December, summa cum laude from her university, I never felt as a parent that testing was the most effective way of measuring her ability or her accomplishments. And I think a lot of teachers and parents feel that way. Certainly, I think we overtest, and the overtesting of the standardized testing. I found even throughout my child's school career, that there was a requirement really to teach to the test instead of having the flexibility of teaching in a creative way where she would be learning not test answers, but actually about around the world. And so I think, I understand that South Carolina can actually look at a waiver from applying for a waiver from the Department of Education to maybe put aside some of the more national testing standards. But I do think giving a test to all the kids to come back in the fall to see where they are is probably not a fair assessment at looking at how much they've achieved. Granted, home learning, through distance learning, through supplemented by some parents, kids are going to be at all different places when they come back in the fall. And I do not disagree that it's going to be a huge challenge to assess where they are. But rather than measuring that with a single standardized test, if possible, I think it would be great if we could look at it on a more child-by-child basis and figure out where maybe some personalized learning is needed, teaching is needed, where we need to provide the child maybe with some extra resources. This takes time, this takes money, I understand that. But I think for these children to move ahead in the school system and not be penalized by what's happened here, we have to find those resources and make those assessments a more one-on-one type of situation.
Very good points. Mr. Hartman, with your educational experience, what are you thinking about all of these assessments and the lack thereof currently?
We don't need as many assessments that we are presently experiencing here in South Carolina, and that the teachers in the districts are required to give and oversee, but I do believe in accountability. And I do believe in some of the national and standardized testing. And I do believe that if we give our teachers the materials and the resources that they need to meet the needs of our adopted curriculum, our kids are going to be as successful as any other students in the United States. We got to remember that we're not the only ones that have been through this COVID-19 experience. And we have to realize that everybody is still on the same playing field. It's just not us here in Beaufort County. So standardized testing, I believe in some standardized testing. I believe in accountability. And I firmly believe that if we can give our teachers the resources they need, that our students will be as successful as students anyway.
I definitely want to bring up the resources piece. As a high school teacher, one of my pet peeves is we have these end of course exams for all of these major core content, but our state just will not release the information back to us to tell us where our shortcomings are. They just say this is what each child made, but they won't tell us this is why they made what they made. So I can evaluate myself as a teacher and say, okay, I need to do a better job on this type of topic here. And I never get that information. So it's really hard to improve on myself and my teaching if I don't have that information. And a lot of states do give that information, but the problem is you have to pay for that information because you have to rewrite the test every time they give that information out. But wouldn't it be nice to grow and improve on my own shortcomings if somebody could just tell me what they are? That would be lovely. Well, my final question for y'all this evening is, Chris, what do you believe is our top problem, our top issue surrounding public education today?
For South Carolina, I think our top problem is paying teachers what they need to be paid. I mean, I keep going back to that, but unless you have a quality workforce and adequate workforce and enough teachers, how can we expect our education system not to shine? So I would have to say teacher pay, teacher benefits, and providing teachers the resources they need, certainly coupled with classroom size as well, because teachers, as you said yourself, how can you improve if you don't know what your deficits are, but how can you teach children in the most effective manner unless you have a classroom size that allows you to do what you do best?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Hartman, your same question for you. So what is your top issue in education?
It's kind of a combination of things right now for me. First of all, I'm reading in the paper today where the teachers in Beaufort County have received a freeze in pay, and the expectations of them going back to school with even more responsibilities than they had last year. It doesn't seem fair. The fact that my daughter-in-law doesn't get a break many days, not only for lunch, but also some time to do some planning. These are just some of the issues. The funding, getting a solid funding base in place, getting the money directly into the classroom. These are all very important issues. But if you ask me right today, I think the biggest challenge we're going to have when we get these students back in school this fall is the additional resources teachers are going to need. Because when kids come back from the summer, there's generally a lag in terms of where they are. But now you've got some kids that have kept up with their studies, some kids you don't know where they are, some kids we've never heard of. So that fourth grade teacher, sixth grade teacher, eighth grade teacher, English teacher at the high school, the spread and learning curve and those classes are going to be so far apart that it's going to be very, very difficult to get back on track. And it's just not going to happen in 1 year, because this is going to take maybe a year, maybe 2 years to even get close to being back. So I think the biggest thing we're facing for this coming year is to provide the necessary resources and support for teachers, whether it be assistance in the classroom, more time for after school activities, but we need to look at that and start planning for some assistance to make sure that they can best deliver their instruction.
Thank you so much to both of you. Is there any final words that either of you would like to say regarding education or your platform or any of that right there? So, Chris, I'll start with you. Is there anything you would like to say in closing?
First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to have this and be able to dialogue about education. And I would just say, when I am elected, I will certainly make education a priority for myself. As a legislator, I don't think anything is more critical to the future of South Carolina than ensuring that our citizens have a great education to start their lives.
Thank you. Mr. Hartman, anything you would like to say in closing?
Well, I thank you again for the opportunity to speak to the teachers of South Carolina. Education has been a part of my life, my whole life. I started kindergarten, and I spent the next 30 years continually going to school every year until I got my doctorate from the University of Michigan. I will say this, that there are probably people who've been in the legislature who have been strong advocates of education. And there are probably people who will be in the legislature in the future who are strong advocates of education. But you'll find nobody that's any more supportive of public education than Phil Hartman.
Well, thank you both so much. Again, for everybody watching, this is Phil Hartman, who will be running on the June primary ballot against Jeff Bradley, which is the Beaufort incumbent for House Seat 123. And Christin DeVries, who will be running in the November election on the Democratic ballot against whoever wins at the primary. So thank you both so very much. I appreciate it. And I hope you all have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.